Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks so much for being here. We are going to get started. And just a few reminders, please make sure to rename yourself with your name and pronouns. And then just check to make sure that you are muted. And we would love to see your faces. So if you are able and can turn on your video, that would be great as well. You also have the option to turn on closed captioning down at the bottom bar of your Zoom screen. And so feel free to use that as well by clicking more and let us know if you have any questions about that. All right. So I think there are those reminders. If you're just joining us, please rename yourself and start your video if you can, and make sure you stay on mute. We will have time for questions towards the end. And I would just like to, we can go to the next slide. Welcome you to the November Teach Climate Network workshop, which is Understanding the Power of COP26, or the Conference of Parties, number 26. We are going to share the slide deck with you in the chat. Please be aware that you will have editing capabilities, so just be careful about typing on it or things like that. This is a live slide deck, but you're welcome to follow along with us as we go here. So I would like to introduce myself. My name is Marie Fargo. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Instructional Resources Coordinator at Climate Generation. I'm coming to you from Duluth, Minnesota, on the contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe and the ancestral lands of the Northern Cheyenne and Dakota. And I'm one of your presenters today, so I'd like to introduce the next presenter as well.
Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Sarah Goodspeed. I use she, her pronouns. I'm our Senior Youth and Policy Manager here at Climate Generation, and I am based in Minneapolis, which is Dakota land, and in borders Anishinaabe land.
Great. And we would like to do a land acknowledgement today, and recognizing that this is just a beginning step in getting reparations for Indigenous communities. But I would like to read you this acknowledgement. We are coming to you from the lands of the Dakota and Anishinaabe people. We encourage you to reflect upon the historical legacies of genocide, forced relocation, and other forms of attempted cultural erasure that continue to impact Indigenous peoples today, and urge you to commit to continued learning and justice seeking. And so we would love for you to share in the chat with us what native lands you are on and where you're joining today. So you can find your native land at the link nativeland.ca, which we will provide in the chat as well. I'll give everyone a minute to do that. Wonderful. Thanks everyone for sharing. Next, if you are new to our workshops, we do want to kind of introduce Climate Generation a little bit. So Climate Generation's overarching vision or mission is to ignite and sustain the ability of educators, youth, and communities to act on the systems perpetuating the climate crisis. And we will accomplish this through 3 strategies that are guided by our team, which are overcoming disinformation, centering anti-racism and systemic equity, and personalizing and localizing climate change action. And so now we'd like to hear from you a little bit. We're going to take a poll, and we'd love to hear what you are hoping to take away from today's workshop. And this is a Slido poll, so if you're not familiar, you will go to slido.com and then enter the number at the top of your screen. So the number is 380540. All right, it looks like we're looking for climate change lessons for a high school level class. What is COP? Yes, why is it important? You've come to the right place. More resources for teaching climate change at a community college level. Great, we have those too. Learn more about supporting teachers, teaching climate in an informal setting for various ages. Great. So it sounds like we have a diverse array of educators here today. That's wonderful. Feel free to keep populating that for just a moment, but we are going to move on to our agenda. So I think we'll be able to cover kind of what people are looking for today. Today we are going to talk about what COP is, what is the Conference of Parties, and then looking at COP26, which is happening right now in Glasgow, Scotland, and looking at what's going on there. We'll also talk about how climate generation is currently involved at COP26, and then we'll share some resources with you that you can bring to your students and learners. So now I will turn it over to Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us here. So what is a COP? I'm really excited to share a little overview about the Conference of Parties and what our program and how our programming can help everyone kind of learn about what it is, what's happening, and also how you can all get engaged. So our next slide. So the COP stands for the Conference of Parties, which is what the United Nations calls the governing body of the United Nations to tackle climate change, is the UNFCCC. And so every year the Conference of Parties brings together every single nation in the world who have signed onto the United Nations. They come together to talk about how are we going to tackle climate change together. This is a global problem, a global crisis, and every single country in the world needs to be part of creating these solutions together. So COP26 is the 26th year that the nations are coming together. Climate Generation has been sending delegations to witness and influence this process ever since COP15. So we've been supporting this work for over a decade, just really helping to engage educators, engage our audiences in how our nations are helping to secure commitments to climate action worldwide. So that includes sending delegations of activists, of educators, of researchers, businesses, and other government agents at different levels who all come together, thousands and thousands of people from across the world to talk about climate change and how we'll take action together. This year, we were also excited to send some student delegates to the Conference of Youth. So that was a pre-COP conference that happened last weekend. And then COP began over the weekend. And so our students were joining together with other young people around the world to create messages to bring to our world leaders as they create negotiations, as they go through negotiations in COP itself. And so there's a really important action, especially for educators to be aware of. It's called ACE, it's Action for Climate Empowerment. So if you're familiar with the Paris Agreement, happened when the COP was held in Paris, when all the nations agreed to ambitious commitments that all of the nations in the world were going to take action on climate change. And part of that commitment was ACE, that every single country would engage its citizens, its communities in taking action along with those national commitments. And so ACE is a pathway for educators, for communities to be part of those national solutions. And so the United States is just creating an ACE focal point. as part of our commitments. So again, there are 196 countries who have signed on to the Paris Agreement. That's every single party of the United Nations. And when the US was the only nation who tried to withdraw from the Paris Agreement, which was repealed after last year's elections, and the US has recommitted to the Paris Agreement, including with a new ACE focal point. So we now have 2 staff at the federal level who are organizing our ACE engagement with educators and with communities across the nation. And so Climate Generation has been a part of these conversations at the national level, and it's connecting with other nations at COP to learn how other countries are doing ACE in their own countries, what we can learn and what we can bring back to the US. And it's our hope that we'll be able to engage all of you as educators in some of these strategies to teach climate change and to engage our communities in action. So I also include non-federal leadership. So that's reflecting that all of us are part of those solutions. And even when the US in the previous few years was not engaged at the UN level, there were still non-federal actors that were committed to continue moving us toward our commitments. So that includes We Are Still In, that was thousands of businesses, local governments, colleges and universities, cultural institutions, faith groups. It could include schools and nature centers, some of the places where you might work. A lot of institutions signed on to We Are Still In to do all our parts and together continue moving the US toward those goals. Including the United States Climate Alliance as well, which was states, many governors had signed on to continue moving their states toward those federal commitments as well. And so when you're thinking about bringing all of these lessons back to your own classrooms, in the next slide, here are some guiding questions on different considerations to talk about with your students as they're understanding what does that global collaboration look like? How do we move towards these? So not only is it really important to acknowledge the expertise in the room, a lot of our students may come from global communities, may be connected with a lot of different parts of the world, and have powerful stories and insight to share. We have a collection of students' stories on Climate Generation's website. You might hear some from your own students. So definitely ask what they already know about climate change, not just here at home, but in different parts of the world as well. Ask who is impacted. What do those climate change impacts look like in different parts of the world? And who is responsible? Some really powerful conversations and learning come from understanding, particularly here in the US, how energy intensive our structures are, our infrastructure is, and why is that? And especially when you look, we have some activities that students can do to research the different countries' impacts on climate change, which includes how energy intensive are those countries' economies. And it's incredibly enlightening to consider with these questions, which are the same questions that our world leaders are grappling with in the COP negotiations. Who's responsible and what's fair as far as the commitments that each country should do to address the problem. And so what can I do is a really big part of empowering students and empowering all of our communities to be part of those solutions, and to take all of our own actions as individuals, as communities, as schools, and to connect with those different partners so that collectively we are part of those solutions, and education being part of that infrastructure, in particular with ACE, not just being a place for our buildings to be more sustainable, lower our own footprints, but to engage us as students, engage us as leaders, and being part of those global solutions. So Marie is going to share next about more of our resources. But for the next 2 weeks, on the next slide, you can follow Climate Generation's delegation at COP26. So they're sending out daily digests about what is happening in Glasgow, how the negotiations are going, people that they're meeting with. So this week we have educators from across the US. Next week we have an all Indigenous delegation who will be sharing their stories and their experiences on the ground at COP26. So definitely follow for more resources and tools, and every day you'll have new stories to share with your students so that they can get a little bit of insight into how those global negotiations work, and how each of us can be a part of that as well. So I'll hand it over to Marie.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Yes, I would agree as well, Seth. The Daily Digest is an awesome breakdown of what's going on the ground at COP. And so we are going to share in the chat with you now the slide deck. That way you can follow along a little bit. You can see that there are some links that you'll be able to click and access either now or later. And then we will do one activity where you'll want to be able to type in the slides. But for now, we'll just have you follow along. So as Sarah mentioned, Climate Generation has this great digest, and we have a number of other resources that help give you an insider's look at the COP26 proceedings and support your students learning about global climate policy. And you can visit the window into COP26 link there at the top for more information. But today I'd like to focus on our COP Educator Toolkit. And so this toolkit was designed for you to help your students see through a global lens all of the impacts and solutions around climate change. So just a brief overview of what's in the toolkit. It starts out with background information. So what COP is, when it began, why it's important. Then it kind of highlights previous COP events. So major landmarks like the Kyoto Protocol or the Paris Agreement, some of that history. After that, there's a section at kind of an inside look of the COP26 proceedings. So an overview of the goals of this year's proceedings in Glasgow and an introduction to our 6 delegates. And then new and continually updated as COP is happening is our events section. And so the events piece provides links to live and ongoing events where you can chat with our delegates, which we'll talk about in a little bit. See live COP presentations and things that are happening, and read up on COP occurrences through our blog and the digest. And then we do have an activities section. So we partnered with educators from the School of Environmental Studies in Apple Valley, Minnesota, to create 5 activities. And these Minnesota educators have actually attended previous COPs with their students. And so they had a really great firsthand look at what students might need to know and kind of how to shape that learning. So we're really excited about those activities. And then I do want to mention that we just include further resources at the end. But we are now going to explore some of the activities that you can share with your students. So going into that activity section, if you are in the COP toolkit already, which you don't have to be, but if you are following along, we are on page 10 of the toolkit. I'm going to provide an overview of the first 3 activities, and then we'll briefly explore activities 4 through 6. So activity 1 is looking all about how countries around the world experience climate change. So students get a chance to choose a country of their anywhere in the world and research its experiences with climate change. So both impacts and solutions that they're working on. We provide some articles for a number of countries, but students will need to do further research and can pick any other country as well. Section 2 or activity 2 is a presentation where students share out about the country and they chose and what they learned. And we suggest doing this through Google Maps, just so that students can put their country on the map with information and kind of have a geographic display of where all the countries are. And there are instructions provided for that. But you could also do something like a poster presentation. Activity 3 is learning what is an INDC or NDC. So once students understand the different contexts of different countries and how they're relating to climate change, they'll be able to explore the commitments that countries have made or plan to make through COP. So these are called INDCs, Intended Nationally Determined Contributions, when countries have made a plan but maybe not confirmed it. And NDCs are Nationally Determined Contributions once they've officially signed the Paris Agreement to enact those plans. NDCs vary significantly by country. They can include things like renewable energy goals, reducing resource extraction and deforestation, setting policy targets, things like that, but just ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so students would look then closely at their chosen country's INDC or NDC and can answer questions about it on a worksheet that's provided in the toolkit. So then activity 4 is about developing a Talanoa dialogue. And the Talanoa dialogue is described in the toolkit. And we will dive into that in just a minute. And then the activity 5 will be concluding by actually enacting a Talanoa dialogue in your classroom. And then activity 6 we'll talk about kind of at the end. There's a specific activity that relates to that dialogue that you can do with your students. So I'm looking at activity 4 more specifically, and we can go now to the next slide. This video is provided in the toolkit, and students get a chance to watch it and learn what the Talanoa dialogue is. But essentially, it's a method shared at COP23 in Fiji to help countries reach agreements. And according to the Talanoa dialogue platform, Talanoa is a traditional word used in Fiji and across the Pacific to reflect a process of inclusive, participatory, and transparent dialogue. The purpose of Talanoa is to share stories, build empathy, and to make wise decisions for the collective good. The process of Talanoa involves sharing ideas, skills, and experience through storytelling. So we are going to watch most of this video and then think about the 3 questions that were posed in this video and that were also posed in the dialogue in Fiji. All right, so let's watch.
Talanoa is something that we have never done.
And it's also affording an opportunity for everyone to listen to each other, because no one has all the answers, and only together can we find common solutions.
Hello, I'm from Ghana in West Africa.
My name is José Di Bella. I'm here representing Parlaméricas.
I'm Isabel Di Carlo, I'm representing Venezuela.
What I'd like to do today is share with you a story of one of our communities.
I have a story of a farming community that has been heavily impacted on by climate change.
We are building now a city the size of Paris each week.
We really want to rise to the occasion and increase our ambition.
So where we are is eco-villages offer a solution to climate resiliency. Everything is very much local. Local farmers learning from local people to use local resources for themselves to achieve food security, women's empowerment, and feed their families.
Companies are really beginning to align with the Paris Agreement in their long-term strategies, and because we really believe that we can be stronger if we join forces.
And where we'd like to go is a world in 2030 where we can meet our climate objectives, where we're on track for a well below 2-degree trajectory.
All sources of energy could be coming from renewable sources.
For me, as a woman that comes from diverse community, it's very important in terms of climate action that we include diverse models of knowledge.
As IKEA, we have a target that we would like to generate as much renewable energy as we consume.
Align development goals with the climate issues.
This is the Chinese concept of building actually a community for shared future for mankind.
how do we get there?
We're going to plant 5 million trees across the country so that it is much cooler, we have more rain, we have more cleaner atmosphere, we have less flooding and less erosion.
We need enabling environments. We need to have resolve at the level of public and courage by the politicians.
It is by updating national legislation, by bringing in the parliaments to work closely with the national governments.
Positive feedback between action by governments and other actors.
We need to highlight local actions, and we also need to increase and keep engaging in this Talanoa dialogue.
We need the scientists, we need the policymakers, and we need communities on the ground to talk to each other.
Investors are asking governments to improve the system which allows everyone to report on their climate-related financial information.
We go there by involving everybody.
To be able to get to the Paris goals, it is important that we do what we know we can do today and not wait at all.
To go ahead and take a second leap of faith and go for the decarbonization of the economy.
Polish President.
All right, so as you can see, that is kind of a good overview of what happened at the Talanoa Dialogues in Fiji in COP23. And so after students learn about that, you would ask them to think about those 3 questions that were posed in the video from their chosen country's perspective. And so the Talanoa Dialogue asked 3 questions: where are we, where do we want to go, and how do we get there? And so looking at activity 5 would kind of conclude this series by having each student represent their country's answers to those questions during a classroom discussion using the Talanoa Dialogue process. And so activity 6 is kind of a bonus and new activity because COP26 is happening right now. This gives you and your students a chance to share your answers to the 2nd and 3rd questions in Glasgow. And so we can go to the next slide. Tomorrow, November 4th, we're going to have a live conversation with Climate Generation's delegates during the Teach Climate Chat from 12 to 1 p.m. Central Time. And you can attend that chat live with your class or as an individual and share your thoughts of where do we want to go and how do we get there. You can also ask questions of our delegates, and it'll be a really fun, exciting kind of back and forth to see what's going on from our delegates' point of view. But right now, we would love to take a moment for you all to get a chance to share where you want to go and how we're going to get there. And what you write might be shared with our COP delegates so that they can bring educators and then hopefully students' perspectives to their UN presentations and their conversations in Glasgow. So you can see on slides 19 and 20, there are kind of sticky note speech bubbles. And you can click and hold a speech bubble to drag it to an empty space. And then if you double click on that bubble, you can type in your response to each question. If you have more than one response, that's great too. And we'll take 2 or 3 minutes to fill out slide 19 and 20 with where do we want to go and how do we get there? I see we have just a few new people joining us. So if you'd like to, let's see, join us in our slide deck here. We're on slides 19 and 20, and we are answering questions about kind of where we want to go around climate change solutions and how we want to get there. And this is to share educators' perspectives with our delegates at COP26 in Glasgow so that they can share perspectives. Seeing a lot of furious typing. This looks great. See a lot of ideas popping up. Let's just take about 1 or 2 more minutes here. So if you haven't moved on to slide 20, you can do so now. Feel free to pop back and forth if you think of new ideas. Yeah, this is great. I'm seeing a lot of great ideas. I'm going to read a few out loud in case it's hard to read on the screen for those of you watching the recording. Where do we want to go? A place where youth shape our future and influence decision makers, leaving fossil fuels in the ground, depoliticize the climate crisis and its solutions. An equitable future holding industrialized nations and companies accountable. A place where all of our voices are heard and frontline communities are centered, a low carbon future where we're thriving. And some ideas for how do we get there, partly by doing less and using less, including all people's voices, less capitalist approach and more wild strawberries. I love it. Providing money, education, and support to communities on the front lines of climate change impacts. These are wonderful ideas, and feel free to keep adding to this. We are going to kind of conclude with a couple more slides here. But again, this will be something that we can share with the COP delegates who are in Glasgow right now, and they'll be able to take your ideas with them, which is really exciting, and share them out. And again, if you joined us after I said this, we do have a Teach Climate chat tomorrow from 12 to 1 p.m. Central Time. And you will actually be able to talk and connect with delegates and talk about these ideas that you have and ask any questions that you might have. And if you are able to include your students on that conversation, that would be really excellent. We'd love to hear student voices as well. All right, so then I did just want to share a few additional resources that you can find at the end of the toolkit. The World Climate Simulation Game is a really great resource. It's an En-ROADS resource, if you're familiar with that, designed by Climate Interactive, MIT and UMass Lowell's Climate Change Initiative. And it enables students to create different scenarios for greenhouse gas emissions to see how global temperatures are affected. So it's a great opportunity to role play the UN negotiations and change different mitigation efforts to see how quickly and how intensively countries need to act to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and stave off the worst effects of climate change. Another great activity is the Climate Action Tracker. This lets students check in on how different nations are meeting their NDC targets and whether they're closing in on those targets or not. So it's a great extension activity. And then you and your class can follow live speakers and a lot of the events at COP through the Climate Action Tracker. So you just need to register for free and you can view a lot of different videos. And then lastly, as we mentioned, you can follow Climate Generation staff and our delegates by signing up to receive the COP Digest. Lots of great options there. We'd love for you to share in the chat now, what is one way that you might use these resources with your students or learners? The World Climate Simulation Game. Oh, great. Laura's planning on sharing them with the teachers at their school. Cool. Oh, great. Don has another workshop this afternoon where these resources will get shared. Awesome. Thank you. Amy mentions not only teachers, but also environmental clubs. Yep, for sure. Non-formal spaces too. Nature centers, great. Under says create new programs to target teens that our work group doesn't do as much with yet. Using the climate simulation. And thanks, Don, for sharing info on your workshop. Great, wonderful. Well, I'm glad that these can be helpful to you. Feel free to keep checking in. Again, we are updating things as CAP continues on through, I think it's November 12th. I hope I got that date exactly right, but yeah, for the next couple of weeks here. So keep checking in for updates on that toolkit. And then just to wrap up, something to keep in mind as you think about education and taking climate action, there are some recommendations from the, I believe from the ACE framework. So one is that educational leaders need to see themselves as environmental and climate leaders who can foster a sustainable future for young people in the world that they are inheriting and shaping. Climate leaders need to work with K-12 educators, so having that partnership to design equitable learning that supports just climate action, and contributing significant funding and investing in K-12 schools to support a sustainable and climate resilient transition. So those are three main goals and pushes that are happening now. And then just wanted to share a little bit about our Teach Climate Network. If you are not already part of our network of about 8,500 educators, we would love for you to join us. Some things that you would receive are a monthly newsletter in your inbox with Teach Climate tips, monthly virtual workshops like the one that you're in today, and different ways to connect with people who are passionate about this work. And so you can go to the link provided here to sign up for free. And then we would love for you to just connect with us and engage on social media. You can always check out climategen.org for more information, and feel free to email Seth as well, who's our Teach Climate Network coordinator, and he can answer any questions you have about the network generally or point you in the right direction.